let's go with Connor in Texas.
Okay.
Connor wants to respond
Hey,
to
guys.
you. Hey, Connor, it says in the comments you want to answer V's question about women in the universal house of faith.
Oh, yeah. Dale called the other week.
So,
Right. Just to recap, so you have called before and talked about Baha'i. We've gone over different Baha'i things, and I had said at one point that I was frustrated that at the highest level, which would be the universal house of faith, women are not allowed to hold positions, and I saw that as inherently sexist. And then when Dale called in, Dale tried to walk around the idea without being trying not to be sexist, but making a inherently sexist claim. And V got really pissed off about it. And I would love to hear what you have to say about it, because I have no idea how that view can be held without being recognized as sexist.
So it was during the call with Dale, and personally, I think that y'all's conversation was just like page adjacent to each other, so maybe that's why y'all had a disconnect with her. But anyway, so it was. V asked Dale a question during that call, which I hadn't thought of before, and it was you asked Dale. What is so progressive about it? Like, that was the specific question. And this is a speculative answer I have.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend it's a perfect answer, but it's the best one I could come up with that is both the least crazy and takes the least amount of mental gymnastics.
Okay. Love both of those things.
So given when the faith started, or back in the mid 1800s in Persia, and this is taking all of what the Baha'i faith says about women in a holistic thought process, is that at that time, women were legally all over the world second-class citizens. So this is where I'm just starting from at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it goes to the point where, so basically what the Baha'i faith says about women is that from a legal standpoint, they should not be second-class citizens and should have equal rights to men. So that where they're not sold off into marriage by their fathers, they're not owned by their husbands, they can choose their own marriage partner, they can decide to go get an education, stuff like that.
Cool. Where does it say that?
Well, it says it's in the scriptures.
That's very specific for the 1800s. That's kind of cool. Do you have like a verse that you can tell us?
Sorry, with all of the different texts, like I said before, Baha'u'llah himself wrote 10 times more volume than the Bible. So
Right.
it's kind of, some of it's a little spread around, so I don't have a specific, this book, this line,
Okay.
off the top of my head.
I'm only asking because I know that a lot of Christians do that too, where they will say, well, the Bible clearly says this, and it's from an amalgamation of different verses plus what they may have learned in church plus some of their own interpretation. And while I agree with you that those are good things and things that should be pursued, I do want to make sure that we are being as accurate as possible when saying that your texts say these things, as opposed to we have interpreted our text to say these things. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I can assure you I have personally read these lines of scripture,
Okay.
because it's been over a time period of a better part of a decade that I've done all this, or all the of what I've learned of the faith.
Okay.
So I'm not going to remember specifically where it's all at.
All right. That's fine. So yeah, continue.
So continuing on. This goes into this next part goes into another aspect of the faith. And this is how I'm tying it all together. is that personally, as a faith, we believe that the different messengers, every time they get sent, in a way, they essentially have to make small compromises to make the broader teachings just a little bit more palatable for all of society across the world. Like I said, I'm not pretending this is a perfect answer. So my only speculation is that women were left out of just the universal house of justice as a compromise for the misogynists.
I mean, that's
to get them on board with looking at them being equals under a legal sense.
Is that documented anywhere? Like, because
No, like I said, this is completely speculative on my part.
I mean,
like, we have no clarification on the issue.
Yeah. And Connor, like, I think you're probably right. Like, that makes sense to me, that the equality of women in the highest position of power in this religion was not well, we hate women and so we're never going to let it was probably a cultural compromise that just happened, and women were the sacrificial lambs on this particular slaughter. Happens quite often, turns out. But
right.
Yeah, okay. But if my concern here then becomes, well, that's a very secular way to look at a religious thing. And while I'm all for that, it does make me wonder how you can determine which things were done via compromise in order to pursue an end goal, and which are, actual goals that were handed down and should be adhered to, right? Like, this feels very close to cherry picking.
No, you're right.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's no way to tell. This is all personal speculation.
Okay. I respect that. So why do you need this particular set of guidelines at all if what you're doing is looking through them and saying, here are things that I agree with, here are things I don't. I'm going to adhere to the things I agree with and explain away or, dismiss the things that I don't agree with. It sounds like the Baha'i faith is useful maybe as a starting point to be like, hey, what is my personal morality? Let me look at it through this lens. But it doesn't feel like you're adhering to anything outside of what you already feel is morally true, which isn't a bad thing, but it doesn't feel like it's leading your morality in any way.
And
well, not for nothing, the faith has helped me move in a more positive direction than before I found it in some regards. That's a whole conversation in of itself.
Oh, yeah, I have no doubt. Lord of the Rings and Artemis Fowl helped me move in a positive direction back when I was thinking about all this stuff for the first time as a teenager. Like, yeah, it can be very helpful. And there is nobody is saying that it can't be or that there isn't positive outcomes from it. But
no, I was just wanting to clarify that it's not just I don't view it as just I'll ignore what I don't like and only go with what I do like in the moment. I will try and look at is maybe what I'm currently believing, maybe there's some deficiency in one regard or another, and take a close look at that kind of situation still.
Oh yeah, and you can absolutely cherry pick very collegiately. Like it's not an either or situation. Some people, yes, will just like grab a verse of their holy text out of thin air and quote it at you in order to get their way, right? But there are lots of people who do a lot of deep study and look at the language that was originally spoken and figure out how that fits into things. And that's still cherry picking. It's just scholarly cherry picking. And
yeah,
again, like, if that's what you want to do with it, cool. But the question then just comes up for me, what is this faith giving you beyond a good starting buffet?
So I'll keep going on this, but I also want to loop back around to, hold on, I'm about to lose my train of thought here. want to loop back around to. All right, so if I can clarify that in a little bit, I will. So, the you were saying the why believe some things, but almost supposedly, but while still having other things you may not necessarily agree with.
Yeah.
So, on a personal level, I see the faith as a constructive, overall, like net positive, constructive method for building and creating a better world. It may not be perfect to what way some people see it, or it may be the exact opposite to some people say it, but I see it as a way for people to come together from around the world to work together to build a better society. And it's more like the you swallow your pride a little bit kind of thing in order to do what you believe is a broader, more necessary goal.
And the equality of women is swallowing one's pride?
No. That's the important thing. The women not being on the House of Justice would be I'll just swallow my pride in being in that aspect so that the legal status of women is made equal to men in every regard.
Oh, okay. So I do want to touch on one more thing, and then I know you want to jump in.
Okay.
This reminds me of the tactic that was taken during, I want to say, the 1960s, when they were trying to stop gay people from being criminalized, right? And at the time, you could be wearing a particularly nice outfit, and a cop would be like, that looks gay, I'm going to beat this person up, and that would be fine. Or if you were caught wearing more than, I believe, 3 articles of clothing that were designated for another gender, you could be arrested legally. And it was criminalized, essentially. And the thing that they did was they got it into the DSM-4, 3 at that point. They classified it legally as a mental illness. Not because they thought it was a mental illness, but because they were like, we need to get this off of the books as a criminal thing. If we can say it's just like a mental health thing, then we're not going to be criminalized for it anymore. And we can maybe start getting some help, like support from the medical institution and not be thrown in prison. Which, okay, like I get it. You have to do desperate things in order to like find some level of relief from being persecuted. So if that's what your argument is for this, it's practical at the time, but the problem is it then became a mental disorder legally, and that has been an uphill battle to try and undo. And it's still happening right now with trans stuff. And so the medicalization of anything that is not cisgender and heterosexual is a direct result of this tactic. So my point is, I get it if it's a short-term stopgap for a long-term goal of equality, cool. But you can't just sit there and be like, okay, well, we did that, so now we just deal with it. It should be a step in a much, much more progressive direction, because otherwise it's going to, and it sounds like it has from talking to Dale, impact people right now in the long term in negative ways. So that's all I have to say on that.
I don't want to... I think that there was a disconnect between y'all and Dale, so I don't think it would be constructive for our conversation to try and go into what she may have been thinking or intended to say, because we don't really know.
Oh, agreed.
Okay,
I don't know what she intended to say. I just know what she said. So.
Yeah. So I believe I understand where you're coming from, but just to make sure, could you go into like what you imagine going forward from your perspective of what you're thinking at the moment?
Going forward, maybe.
As for like us in the faith, like what you meant by what you just previously said, like
Well,
what were you imagining as like going forward with it?
you made an argument that this was done somewhere in the 1800s, and at the time women didn't have legal rights, and so there was a concession made. And this is, granted, your theory, and I'm running with it. So now women have legal rights, kind of, in the U.S. And so what is the next step? I can't tell you what your faith should do next, but I'm asking, what is the next step to get that concession off the table and actually grant full autonomy and equality to all genders as opposed to just one? Like, it's 200 years. If you guys think that that's a long time, like, you've had a while. What's next? Are we just sitting on this concession forever, or are we moving forward?
So you're asking why not move forward and take it off and update it essentially to allow women on?
Yeah, for a start, that sounds great.
So this gets into another aspect of the faith, which is about how it goes into how we want to avoid. So I'm going to need you to bear with me on this one. So it goes, to start with, it goes into how we are supposed to avoid creating sectarianism within the faith. And it requires us to, like, even though essentially we're not really allowed to change anything about the faith now that has been established back in the 1800s.
But I thought you were all about progressive revelation. How do you justify progressive revelation with you can't change anything?
The progressive revelation happens on a period of eons and millennia.
But that's still change.
It's still change, and so the change would come supposedly, as we believe, when the next messenger appears.
So it sounds like you're saying that you're waiting to do the right thing until this next messenger appears. It sounds like your God is actually getting in the way of you being moral or ethical. Like it sounds like the thing that is an impediment to something that you know is fixable, like, is that God. Why would you hold that up as a source of morals when it sounds like it is getting in the way of moral action?
Because the point of this is to affect the global society, not just like our Western society.
I really don't think that answers. I don't think that answers the question at all. So
I was just starting.
Oh, okay. So again, it sounds like, right, that this deity is standing in the way of doing the right thing. The right thing being granting full equal rights to women, right? And the thing that is in the way is the thing that you're propping up as the source of morality. And it sounds like, number one, your morality is better. Number two, you're able to act on it in a way that God or, that deity is unable to. So, like, just, I have no idea how you could view that God as the source of morality. It's just in the way of moral behavior.
So there is a goal that we believe is determined to happen in this era, this 1,000-year era for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And it is considered the most important thing for us to achieve. And it is literally called the center of the covenant for the faith.
What is this thing?
And do what?
What is this thing that you're supposed to achieve?
Global unity of mankind.
Okay, so
that is the...
Connor, do you have kids?
Continue.
Hold
No.
on. Wait. I I want you to go where you're going, but we have this line that is being contradicted in the moment. So
V, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. How on earth are you supposed to say at the same time, we cannot change anything about our religion, but what our goal is ultimately is to unify all of humankind? How is that? What?
So the reason for that is we are required to avoid sectarian division and allowing anyone to say that they can just change when they don't have what we believe is the authority to change it. Then that would lead to sectarianism, and the whole point of avoiding sectarianism is to avoid sectarian violence. And if we cannot ourselves remain united, how could we ask anyone else outside the faith to join us in uniting the rest of the world when it doesn't even look like we can do it for ourselves?
So oppress the people who are not going to violently fight back and make it seem like you all are unified? Like, it sounds to me like the only reason that this is not a problem is because you're not worried that women in the Baha'i faith are going to get sectarian on your asses and maybe do a little bit of violence because they're not viewed as full and equal, like, people. Like, we're not
allowed to even be violent in the first place.
Okay, so why is sectarianism a problem?
We've seen the history of sectarian
But you're not
violence.
allowed to be violent. So, like, sectarianism shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, it also says that in the Bible, and yet we know the history of violence with Christianity.
Okay, so then you don't get to use we're not allowed to be violent as an excuse to not to answer my question, but it's fine to ignore it when you're giving an answer. Come on, dude, you're going around in circles.
Okay. Hold on, I think we got a little... Could we start over from your point, V?
My point.
Let's.
Sure. My point here is that. Oh, Eric's got the zoom up. Look, my point here is that you are talking about unity and you're talking about uniting all of humankind, while at the same time actively denying certain rights to a group of that humankind. And it sounds to me like the only reason you're allowed to get away with it is because you don't think that the group that is currently being denied all equal rights is going to be sectarian and violent about it. It's not actually unity unless everybody actually is equal. And if they're not, then that's not unity. It's the presentation of unity. Maybe you'll convince other people to join you initially, but that's a lie. I'm pretty sure lying is bad, right? Or is that something you can still do for the next 1,000 years until the next messenger shows up?
No, it's said that we should be honest individuals.
Okay, so how is it honest to say, hey, look at us, we're so unified. Also, this group of people doesn't have full and equal rights yet, but we don't want to tell anybody that or act like that's a problem or combat that because then it'll look like we don't actually have unity. That's a lie.
So I think I may be on a different page. Just to clarify, are we still talking about the women on the House of Justice?
Yes, I'm talking about you making the claim that there were concessions on the equality of women in order to pursue the larger goal of the religion.
Right.
And I'm saying, hey, maybe move past that and maybe start getting those women all those same rights, including being on this universal house of faith or justice or whatever. And you're saying, oh, we can't do that because that'll be sectarian and we need to present a unified front to people. And so my question is, if you are presenting a unified front while at the same time denying equal rights to everyone in your unified group, that's not unity. That is oppression. And if you are presenting it as unity, that is a lie. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Like I said, I never expected any of this to be a perfect answer, and to get to it, none of us have the authority to change it in the faith.
Which is where we get back to, it sounds like your faith is getting in the way of doing the right thing.
Right, because you just said, hey, here's an example of, isn't the whole reason that Baha'i faith is better than other faiths because they allow you to interpret it and do what, like, use it how you want to? Like, isn't that a selling point that you gave us? Like, one of the first calls you had that, like, oh, I was encouraged to go out and look at other faiths and, you know, make it my own and really, like, build my own morality. Like, how is that not changing it?
I don't think I used those words. I'm not going to be able to remember specifically our previous conversation when we talked about that.
So you're saying there is a dogma in the Baha'i faith that you cannot stray from?
There's no dogma.
Okay, then what are we talking about? If you can't change it, what is it if it's not a dogma? You can't at once have no dogma and be completely mentally free and also be told, but you can't change it or question it because it's not negotiable, right? Those two things can't exist in the same space.
No, we can question it.
But you can't change it.
Right.
Okay, that's a bullshit answer. I hope you're not buying that. I hope that you aren't allowing other people to tell you that you can question things, but you don't get to fucking do anything about it. Because that's infantilizing as fuck for you, and I would be offended if I were you and people were telling me that.
Really? Could you explain why you see it that way?
Sure. Hey, Eric.
Go for it.
We are now going to sell our house and move to Buenos Aires.
Ooh. I mean, wrong direction, but that's fine.
Okay, so let's pretend you're like, hey, but V, we don't have the money for that, and I'm going to go into debt if I need to do that.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Well, you can ask that question, but we're still going to Buenos Aires, and you don't get to decide if we're doing that or not with your life. You get to express your concerns to me, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
But, like, if I'm concerned that I'm gonna go into debt, but I don't have a choice, does that mean my debt goes away, or am I?
No. You still have to deal with it, but that's a concession you have to make.
Oh, it sounds like you're treating me like a child.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm treating you like a child, or like a servant, or like somebody who does not have full autonomy over their own decisions. Was that helpful?
No, I see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve better than that.
Yeah, that's my entire point here. You are a fully autonomous person with a fully formed or developing morality, like all of us have. And the fact that there are people telling you that you can question things, but you can't change them, or that there are things that you must make concessions on for the good of the group in a way that violates your own personal moral inklings is problematic, man. Like, get out of there.
Well, first of all, I do believe that the individual should be willing to should be able to submit to the community as if it's for a necessary good.
Okay, so actually, here's the example that I wanted to throw out there. Okay, sounds good. Connor, for this example, you have a baby. Okay, congratulations. Okay.
All right,
Connor, I'm going to put your baby through college. I'm going to set up that fund, at some point in the future. I'm just going to come to your house and punch your baby every day until then. Right. So I'm going to come to your house every day, maybe 9 o'clock. I'm going to just punch your baby in the face for a little while. But you know what? If you let it happen, they're going to get to go to college later. Right. There's a greater good happening. So me being shitty in the meantime, it should be fine because they're going to get to go to college later. Right. Does that excuse me punching your baby in the face every day? No, it just makes...
I think we view this as different levels of shitty. The point as a whole. I think we view it as two different levels of shitty.
Okay. Well, so I'm getting really, really over the top to try and prove a point. And that is that the idea that you need to put up with shitty behavior at all because something's going to get better later, feels like that should not be an obstacle if there is a divine entity capable of making things not that way. Like, if you're a person, there are rules, but if there's a divine God that is able to change things and the case is that they're not, like, that's just shitty on the part of that God, right? No matter what happens later, the fact that they're being shitty now is not excused by what's coming later. It's just what comes later, right? The shittiness doesn't get swept under the rug.
I guess at this point, our disagreement can be boiled down to whether or not you view a more short-term, viewing things in the short term or mid-term, or the very long term as what's more appropriate to achieve a goal.
No, that's not the argument. That's not where we disagree. We disagree that you say that you have a faith that gives you insight into morality, and that morality is actively stopping you from making moral changes and adjustments now in favor of someday it'll get better, right? The arc of history bends towards justice. Don't worry about doing shit now. In fact, you're forbidden from doing shit now. What you should be doing is focusing on this other thing, because eventually that other stuff will get itself sorted out. And coming to us saying that you are part of a faith where that's moral and you are trying to get other people involved in that, like, that's where we have a problem.
I never said I was trying to get other people involved.
You just want to unify all of humankind using your religion as a blueprint.
Yeah, but they don't have to be part of the faith.
Then why do you care what they think about women in the Universal House of Justice?
You had a question. I wanted to answer it.
So I think originally the question that I had was, and I want to be clear here, right? My understanding of the Baha'i faith is one that is way less sexist than other religions. That said, there are problems, and this is one of them. And if we only pointed out where we did at the very beginning of our first calls, which is all the places where we can be allies and we can work together, right? Those are all wonderful things. It's just that there are things that need to be contended with. There are problems there. They may not be the biggest, most intense problems, but they are there, and they should be looked at. And that's
right. And this is a big reason why I call. It's like, y'all get me thinking of things that I may have not have thought before. And it's very good to reflect on yourself and be cognizant of what you believe in.
As long as you don't change anything.
Oh man.
I'm not going to get past that. Like, I'm not mad at you, Connor. I want to make that clear. I'm just upset that we can have these conversations. And my whole goal through having conversations like this is to get people to think about things and get people to maybe do a little bit of changing of their own mindset or their worldview or their community. And the fact that you are coming to these conversations fully willing to question and to go for like these deep conversations, but at the end of the day, you're not going to change things. That's depressing. And it makes me wonder why we're talking. Like, is it just mental masturbation?
It's not like we're just sitting on our hands over here. I mean, we are engaged in the local communities around us to work with the local communities to create a better world. Like, maybe like Dale, when Dale said, these were her words specifically last week, to encourage and raise young girls to go achieve their full potential in whatever way they want, and like with career or maybe however they see it.
It's just not within their potential to aspire to the highest levels of leadership in that religion, in your religion. Or it's a concession that nobody can act on.
I would not want to be part of a religion where my full equality was a concession for other people, because other men probably would break off and make their own little sect. Like, oh no, let's save the bigots who would leave and make sure they stay at the expense of the equality of women in this organization. It's very clear where the value is, and it's with the bigoted men who would be upset about it. Let's keep them. Let's make sure they don't leave. Let's placate these people who might go sectarian and do violence or whatever, and instead sacrifice the full equality of... like I'm using your words. I didn't know any of this until this call. This isn't me making shit up. You said the religion that you are a part of has made a concession about the full equality of women in order to avoid sectarianism. What that means is that there are people in your organization, in your religion right now, who would leave if women were granted full and equal rights. And you are saying that we would prefer to keep those people in our organization and prioritize their desires over the equality of women. That is the only way that you can spin that. I don't see how you can get around it.
First of all, I've said in a previous call that anyone who is openly bigoted will most likely get kicked out. I can't guarantee it because I'm not there for every single instance.
But how is that not sectarian then? Like, you can't say we can't do these things because people will leave, but also if you're a bigot, you can leave. You're giving two sides of every answer. And it's becoming very clear to me that even though you have done a lot of thinking about this and are convinced that you are coming at this from a rational perspective, there is still a lot of indoctrination that you are dealing with right now. And I would encourage you to sit with these feelings and actively parse through them and pick a side, because you can't straddle the line on every single topic and say yes and no to everything, depending on what is going to get you out of a sticky situation. Either your religion prioritizes unity and prioritizes keeping maybe not open bigots, but bigots in the organization at the expense of women, or they don't care about that because they kick bigots out, in which case your argument about sectarian violence doesn't hold water.
I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah, me neither, Connor.
I loved this so much. People are just like, oh, why is Eric not talking? Because this is great. Connor, thank you. And V, thank you. You put such a fine line under something that I was having a very hard time trying to point out. I was going down the first rabbit trail that I could find, and you just lasered in. Connor, the fact that you say, hey, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to think about this. Or, you know, it evidences a lot of really good things about you. It is definitely supports that, Connor, not only are you open and willing to listen and think about things, but it sounds like your morality is better than the religion that you're espousing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that religion may not be necessary anymore.
Well, to clarify, the stuff you just said, the positive stuff you just said about me is highly encouraged by the faith.
I mean, sure. I don't think that sure. I just don't think that that's the only place that you can get that encouragement. Like, anyway.
Well, I know it's not the only place. To be honest, I see everything in a long-term, like the long-term game.
I hear you.
What is going to be the benefit in the long term? And if it may not be the best way for everyone, but I don't think short term will necessarily benefit society as a whole. Because it's the short term that's typically the most easily dismantled.
I mean, I just don't think that applies here. And I also think that evidence is a weak, either an unwilling or unable God who could change things and either, doesn't care or is too powerless to change it. But Connor, we've been on this call. I think
that's a whole different conversation on what God would be willing to do.
You're right. Connor, thank you for this conversation. It has been a long one, but this was fun. Thank you for calling in.
Always a pleasure.
Take care. Holy crap. I got to piss you off more often. Before we move on, I did see something that I did want to respond to in the comments. It is a very privileged position when I see somebody say that second-class citizens is never a thing they've actually seen exist. And then evidence that they're not in the United States. So if you want to learn more about second-class citizens, look up Plessy versus Ferguson, Plessy. It is a a court ruling in the United States that at one time supported separate but equal laws. And maybe that can help you learn a little bit more about second-class citizens and the history that we see. Like we're living in the South of the United States, and the way that certain groups of people are treated here is very real, very evident, and there's a long history of that.
Well, also their entire religion's built on caste systems, so like it depends what they mean by second-class citizen too. Because I'm like, it's a thing.
It was set off at the beginning of the call.
Okay.
But
Okay.
let's move on. This has been fun.